Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Saumur-Champigny, and we're looking at the Domaine des Roches Neuves 2020 Franc de Pied, Saumur-Champigny. Thierry Germain of Domaine des Roches Neuves is one of the elite wine growers in Saumur-Champigny. He is biodynamically farming 28 hectares of vines, 26 of which are Cabernet Franc. And he takes a very meticulous and thoughtful approach to his work in the vineyard and the cellar. And once you've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with Thierry, you really do get the sense that it is as if he knows and understands intimately each individual vine at the domaine. In addition to their cuvée domaine, as well as the cuvée Roche, both of which are blends from multiple parcels, the domaine is also producing several cuvées parcellaires, and these are single vineyard or single lieu-dit wines that are intended to communicate that vineyard's terroir in the finished wine. Today I wanted to look at one of my all-time favorite cuvées from the domaine, the Franc de Pied. And this wine holds a special place in my heart for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, this wine was the very first wine from Domaine des Roches Neuves that I ever tried, I think back in 2015 or so. And also, this is coming from ungrafted Cabernet Franc vines, which is very rare in the Loire Valley. I actually did a video on the 2017 Franc de Pied back in, actually this was nearly 3 years ago now, and that was in the very early days of Franc Chronicles. And since that time, my knowledge of the Saumur-Champigny appellation and its terroirs, this parcel, Thierry's approach, and really Cabernet Franc in general has grown exponentially. So I thought it was worth revisiting this cuvée in a little bit more detail. So this wine is coming from a teeny tiny parcel of vines in the commune of Saumur. So this is the commune that is the furthest west of the 6 communes that hug the bank of the Loire River in the Saumur-Champigny appellation. And this is actually the largest commune in terms of square kilometers, and it stretches about 7.5 kilometers from north to south on both sides of the Loire, and about 9.5 kilometers from east to west on the south side of the Loire. And even though it is the largest commune, the vineyard area here is actually quite small because the town of Saumur is actually taking up the majority of the vineyard area in the commune. So the vineyard area, actually the majority of the vineyard area, about 75% of the vineyards are actually in this little cluster in the eastern part of the commune. And here the vineyards start just east of the town of Saumur and stretch about 1 kilometer east to the border of the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire. Here the vineyards are at elevations of around 68 to about 85 meters above sea level, and the topography here is relatively flat with the odd, very gentle rolling hill here and there. In terms of soils, what's very interesting is that with the exception of a teeny tiny pocket in the northeast corner of this vineyard area that is influenced by the Turonian tuffeau chalk, the rest of the vineyards in this part of the commune have actually soils that date to the Cynonian age or the Eocene epoch, specifically the Bartonian age or the Ludean age, which is really interesting. And these are the soils actually that dominate the entire Saumur commune. And these are clay sands or sandy clays that will have a flint, quartz, or sandstone pebbly component to them as well. There's a few isolated pockets of a lacustrine limestone, which is a freshwater limestone that dates to the Eocene epoch, but essentially very little influence of the Turonian tuffeau chalk in the Saumur commune. In terms of topsoil, the topsoil textures and depth will vary quite a bit from lieu-dit to lieu-dit as well as parcel to parcel. Now, looking at where the Franc de Pied is coming from, as I mentioned, it's coming from a very tiny parcel of vines, only 0.2 hectares of ungrafted vines. So that is Cabernet Franc that is on its own roots. So in order for a Vitis vinifera vine to survive in Europe, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, to survive without succumbing to phylloxera. That's that little louse that ravaged the vineyards of Europe in the late 1800s. These vines have to be grafted onto an American rootstock. So for Cabernet Franc or another Vitis vinifera vine to survive ungrafted, we need very specific conditions, and that is deep sandy soils. And that is exactly what we have in these parcels, in this parcel of 0.2 hectares. So the soils here are the Sinoian era sands, and we have a pure sand topsoil and then a pure sand subsoil. We've got 6 meters here of pure sand that these vines are planted in. The vines are planted in 2004 at a very high density, 10,000 vines per hectare, and that's more than double what is the average in the Loire Valley. And in terms of how these vines are trained, they're actually trained using a system called échalas. And this is individually staked vines as opposed to vines that are on a trellis system on wires. So individually staked vines. And we actually see this more often on the steep slopes in the northern Rhone as well as the Mosel, for example. And I actually visited this parcel with Thierry in the spring of 2022. And I gotta say, it was a pretty cool parcel to walk through. There was a really special energy to this block. And the soils here are really sandy. You know, it was like walking on a beach. And I asked Thierry about his choice of vine training. And he said, well, I really love the wines from the northern Rhone. And you know, the échalas training system was kind of my nod to that region. And I thought that that was kind of cool as well. Now, in terms of winemaking, what's important to note off the top here is that this wine is generally made with a certain percentage of whole cluster bunches. And that percentage, particularly I should note in recent vintages, and that percentage of whole cluster will vary depending on the vintage. So in the case of this wine, this was hand-picked fruit, of course, and for the 2020 vintage, this was 90% whole cluster, only 10% of the berries were destemmed. And then in terms of fermentation, this was fermented in oval vats with indigenous yeast, and the temperature of the fermentation was held at around 16 to 22 degrees Celsius, so much cooler than what is typical for red wines. And that was in order to really capture the aromas in the wine without extracting any bitter tannins. They would have done some very gentle punch downs to help extract some of the juice from the berries just once a day. The total time on skins was about 8 to 10 days max, so very short skin maceration. And then the aging was in food for about 12 months before bottling. Now, as a final note, for those that aren't aware, the term Franc de Pied does not just apply to Cabernet Franc that is ungrafted. It actually can apply to any vine that is ungrafted. And the word pied in French is another word for vine, and the word franc means freed. So essentially the term Franc de Pied is saying, loosely translating to a vine that has been freed, and in this case, freed of a foreign rootstock. So we have ungrafted Cabernet Franc, deep sandy soils, high density plantings, and 90% whole cluster. So I don't know about you, but I am very excited to try this wine. So immediately on the nose, it is perfumed. So floral, like it's just a burst of pink flowers. Flowers and spice actually is what I'm getting on the nose more so than fruit. And the flowers, as I said, are pink, like peony, like spicy flowers, rose. And the spice note is almost like white pepper. There's a little herbal component as well on the nose, a bit of like a rosemary note. And just the slightest hint of fruit here, but really it leads with spice, with florals, and just this wonderful, wonderful kind of savory fragrance. Now, in terms of the palate, you get a lot more fruit on the palate, which is nice. But the wine still, in general, it leans more savory. The fruits are red. I'm getting like cherry. There's a bit of raspberry here. There's a little bit of a cranberry note as well. And then the spice comes in, and that white pepper. There's a bit of Sichuan peppercorns as well. Those floral notes come through. There's a nice earthy side to this wine as well. A bit of balsam, perhaps a little bit of like even a fresh turn, dark earth kind of potting soil as well. The acidity, as you can probably tell as I'm talking here, the acidity is very snappy. It's very juicy, very racy as well. As is with a lot of Thierry's wines, or all of Thierry's wines, The mouthfeel of this wine is super, super silky. The tannins are just beautifully managed. The texture of the tannins are nice. They have like a corduroy-like texture to them, and there's a little bit of grip on the finish, which is actually, that makes sense. This is a younger wine. This is a wine that is intended for definitely some aging. So that little bit of grip on the finish makes sense. But the fruit is there. There's a plushness to the fruit, reminiscent, it's 2020 vintage, a warmer vintage. So there's nice plushness to the fruit that is working beautifully with those tannins and with that acidity. I love the middle palate of this wine. It has this beautiful sucrosity, like an inherent sweetness to the middle palate, like a creaminess, but also like almost like a sweet pastry thing going on in the middle palate, and that's creating this beautiful jewel-like center to this wine and that whole experience. And then in terms of the overall profile of this wine, it's very energetic. It's very captivating in a way. Yeah, this is such a sexy wine, and like I said at the beginning of this, this is really one of my all-time favorites from Domaine des Roches Neuves. And I was thinking about this wine. I actually tried it. Gosh, just recently I tried this over the course of a few days because I wanted to kind of see how it evolved and changed, and this is something new I'm trying right now, is tasting Cabernet Francs over a few days to see their kind of how they change and whatnot. And this is really a special wine, and definitely one of my favorites. And this wine, I would say, of all of Thierry's cuvées parcellaires, this and Terres Chaudes are probably the two wines that I would say are the most open when they're young, and tend to be really friendly when they're young, but they also age really well. The other ones, Le Marginale, Clos and Les Mémoires, those three cuvées I really think do benefit from a little bit more time in the bottle, but I do find the Franc de Pied to be really open when it's young, which is quite nice, and that makes a bit of sense. It is coming from sandier soils, and particularly the 2020 vintage was a warmer vintage, so this is showing a little bit better in its youth than, say, a cooler or more classic vintage. But this is it's a really sexy, captivating, intriguing wine, and it does lean in a little bit more of an avant-garde kind of style. It's not classic, so to speak, to Saumur-Champigny. You still kind of know it's Saumur-Champigny, but it is a little bit different in that way, and I think that's part of the appeal of this wine for me. And of course, then now I recognize that there's no evidence to support the fact that ungrafted vines do anything different in terms of the finished wine, or that ungrafted vines produce better wine than vines that have been grafted onto an American rootstock. But I'm a romantic, what can I say? And the thought of the fact that we're in the Loire and these are Cabernet Franc vines that are on their own roots. So it's all Cabernet Franc from bottom to top, and it's Cabernet Franc DNA through and through. And yeah, in my head, that makes this wine a little bit more emotional and special for me. Whether that's, like I said, there's no evidence to support that, but hey, that's part of the joy of tasting wine, is we can impart our own kind of views and our own experiences and thoughts and make a wine really, really special in our own way in terms of how we experience it. But if you have not had the Franc de Pied, this is a little bit of a tough one to find because it is pretty small production. But if you do come across it, it is definitely one worth checking out. If you have another cuvée from Thierry Germain from Domaine des Roches Neuves, or if you have another favorite producer from Saumur-Champigny, do let me know what it is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.